This true story happened to my sister. For privacy reasons, I'll call her Jane. Let me first say the house we lived in was definitely haunted. The neighborhood was across the street from a cemetery, and strange things happened in that neighborhood. We were told our neighborhood was built on top of a portion of the cemetery. We didn't believe it until strange things started happening. One day we all were leaving to visit our grandmother. Everyone left the house except my sister Jane. She was 21. She wasn't ready yet and said she would meet us there. When we all left, she was in the basement showering. The basement floor was made of dark gray concrete, and the shower was next to the basement stairs. It was a standalone shower. To enter the basement, you had to go through the kitchen, and there was no other basement door. The basement door had a sliding lock on the outside. In the basement, we had a pool table that was hardly used, and all the balls were in a box on the floor. Well, my sister heard the basement door lock. She heard the lock slide across the door and click. She walked up the stairs and turned the knob, and yes, the door was locked. She started banging and forcibly pushing her weight on the door and yelling, but no one responded. There was no door leading outside, so she was stuck. This was the 90s and we didn't have a cell phone, but luckily we had a home phone in the basement. She ran back down the stairs and called our mom. By this time, we had made it to our grandmother's house. She asked my mom, was anyone still in the house because she is locked in the basement. My mom said no and that everyone left together. She told my mom she heard the lock slide across the door. She put the phone down and ran back up the stairs and tried to open the door again, but it was still locked. Suddenly she started hearing the sound of balls rolling across the concrete floor. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Some of the pool table balls were jumping out the box and rolling across the floor as if someone was sitting and rolling the balls back and forward to each other. She was so scared she told my mom what was going on. My mom was religious and immediately started praying over the phone with her. As my mom was praying, my sister heard the lock slide across the door again. She dropped the phone and ran back up the stairs and turned the knob. The door opened. She ran through the house to check if anyone was there, and it was empty. All the doors and windows were locked. She grabbed the phone on the kitchen wall and told my mom she was okay, but she knew she had to go back in the basement to hang up the phone because all the phones were sharing the same line. She gathered her courage. As she walked back down the basement stairs, she noticed all the balls were back in the box as if they were never touched. She quickly hung up the phone and ran upstairs. That's just one of the experiences of living in that haunted house. A couple of years ago, I was in uni. I had a bad habit of drinking, but I never thought it would cause any harm. I was wrong. My parents are very conservative due to their religion. Good thing I was able to go to another city to start studying, but this led to me drinking even more. Beatrice, my younger sister, knew it, but never told our parents since we always kept each other's secrets from them. My memory is not very reliable here, so I'm mostly telling what people told me about this day, but I was at a party at a friend's house and drank more than usual. I had to go home and went there with my car, so I started driving it even if I knew it was dangerous. I brought up a friend, Mike, with me in the car too since he lived near me. I didn't really care about the danger. I did that before and it was fine. Surely this time won't be different. But it was different. We don't know exactly why, but I drove out of the road in a bridge and the car fell in the river below. That night I suffered permanent brain damage due to the impact and minutes underwater. Mike managed to get out of the hospital in a couple weeks, but I wouldn't wake up no matter what. Soon the doctors realized that I was in a deep coma and could stay in vegetative state for years. My family was told about the possibility of me never waking up, and needless to say it was a shock. Beatrice was still in high school and my parents had been putting a lot of expectations on me. They would make anything, really anything, to wake me up, but ironically they could not make anything, so I was kept like that for nearly 4 years. My parents would visit me frequently, always with the same depressed mood. They didn't want Mike to visit me, but apparently he wanted to. There were several events where nurses caught him trying to sneak past everyone and enter my room. That pattern was, however, broken down a single time, when my mom entered the hospital very happy, saying she found a solution, that she could make all of this end. At the time, my dad and Beatrice were worried that she could want to kill me or that she was getting mad, but nothing really happened and very quickly things got to the normal. Maybe she was referring to another thing, but she refused to tell anyone what all of that was about. We don't really know why or how, but I did wake up in a few weeks after that incident. I was really weird at first, even for the doctors. I literally just woke up as if it was a regular morning. No previous signs of change. It was a sudden, unexpected thing. I'm not sure that was a normal thing. The doctors said that sometimes people just wake up, just like me, but they still seemed a bit confused, as if I was actually expected to never wake up. I had to stay in the hospital for some time still, to know if everything was really okay. My family obviously was extremely excited to know that I finally wasn't unconscious anymore. Beatrice started to tell me about all of the things she did in these 4 years in the first visit, even already telling me some secrets like Vanessa, her girlfriend, that had to be kept away from our parents since they would try to find a way to separate them, no matter how good was their relationship. However, my mom didn't seem that excited. She did smile a lot, but I could feel something off. While I was at the hospital waiting to be able to go back home, I started noticing a few things, but I initially thought it could be just me getting back to reality after so much time in coma. Even if I spent years in bed causing muscle atrophy, I didn't feel weak. Instead, I felt revigorated. I also wouldn't feel hungry when my meal was delayed. I didn't feel tired or sleepy at night, and often would just pretend to be sleeping. My arms and hands would shake, slightly but consistently. I would suddenly feel a shiver down my spine followed by a strong sensation of cold, as if my whole body was being frozen, and my mouth would pick a terrible metallic taste, just for it to suddenly go back to normal after a couple seconds. Eventually I got the pass to go home, and as soon as I could I tried talking to Mike, since at this point I knew about all the incidents. My parents didn't let me leave home at first, so I had to lie about going for a walk to see the city and what changed. I had already messaged Mike and he really wanted to see me in person, not just by the phone. As soon as I got to the coffee shop he suggested, he jumped out of the chair and hugged me strongly. Oh my God, you are actually alive. I don't know why, but I felt uncomfortable with that sentence. I guess I am. We spent the following hour or two talking, mostly about Mike's life and what happened during these years. At some point he asked me, "Do you think you'll be able to ever drink again?" I mean, I couldn't drink any alcohol after that day. I didn't really know what to answer. My rational side agreed that after what happened I shouldn't drink anymore, but I didn't feel scared about it happening again. I thought for a couple seconds and answered jokingly, "Well, I didn't drink any alcohol during this time either." He clearly noticed the delay and me avoiding to actually answer the question, but laughed at the joke. It started getting late, so we decided that this was enough for the day. He went home and I actually decided to go to a bar. Mike's question really left me wondering, so I wanted to see if I could drink. I asked for a shot of vodka. After staring at it for a while, waiting to see if any fear would emerge, nothing really happened, so I just drank it. Strangely, it didn't burn as much as I expected. After a couple minutes, I didn't feel any effect. I asked for another shot, but again nothing really changed. This was very weird to me, since even before the accident when I was a heavy drinker, 2 shots were enough to at least start feeling something. But now, after 4 years of abstinence, I wouldn't feel any difference. After this I just decided to go home. I was reasonably far and on foot, so I shouldn't waste more time. At home, my parents were already worried, telling me I should have gone back earlier. While I was lying about what I've done, I said I went to Leo's Burgers, a crappy restaurant that we used to go when I was in high school. My dad interrupted me and said that the place closed last year. My mom took a deep breath and asked me if I was with Mike. I couldn't really answer since I got nervous pretty quickly. She just left the room and went to the bedroom. I was expecting some huge thing yelling at me for that, but she didn't. She did seem very angry, but the lack of action was weird. My dad did the discourse I was expecting and decided to go to talk to Mom. Beatrice looked at me with what I can only describe as sad and sorry. She always did that when our parents were mad at me, as if she wished that it was her instead of me so I could still be okay. I also went to bed and started pretending to sleep. After a couple hours, I heard my door opening and after some time, closing. After that, I heard whispers coming from the living room that was in front of my bedroom. It was faint, but I could still hear it. I tried to understand it, but it was hard to pick even a single word. I did notice that it was my mom's voice though. After some time she started singing, still very softly. I also picked up a smell I don't know exactly how to describe. It was similar to smoke, but also with a trace of rotten eggs and maybe blood? I'm not sure, I never felt that smell before. However, it was very weak. Maybe it was not even there. Eventually she stopped. It felt awkwardly silent after all that. I wasn't sure if that really happened. Doctors did told me I had brain damage. Maybe this means I could be experiencing things that aren't really real. In the following morning, I tried to talk to her about that, but before I could say anything about it, she was giving me good morning, as if the Mike thing on the day before hadn't happened. I just decided not to bother talking about, since at this point I was not even sure about that whole thing happening. My dad was still somewhat mad, and that actually made me feel a bit better. Maybe I wasn't hallucinating completely yet. I tried messaging Mike to ask him about this, but he didn't answer. I was not even sure he got the messages. I decided to ask Beatrice about the behavior of my mom, but she said she didn't notice anything like what I described. After a few days, a former uni colleague told me that Mike died. He had a heart attack. That's why he never received my messages. I was deeply intrigued by that, and immediately remembered the weird behavior of my mom on that night. This was a Sunday, so she and my dad would go to the church. I decided to ask Beatrice to help me look on our mother's things. She wasn't really believing me that anything was weird, but agreed. After some time searching on her books, I felt something weird about a particular one. The cover said, "Alternative Methods of Prayer for the Sick." It had a dark brown cover as if it was a Bible or something. "What about this one?" I said. "Seems extra boring." "Yes, but I don't know, the sick? Like me?" "Ugh, okay then." The pages were thin and slightly yellow. It seemed mostly like a book to get money from people in bad situations, giving useless advice for multiple sickness. However, as we passed for more pages, things started going increasingly daunting. At some point it had an image with text written in a language I don't know. I tried quickly looking up online different languages and how they looked, but none seemed to match that. After that, some paragraphs starting also be in that same script, and eventually the whole thing was covered with symbols I have never seen, and didn't seem to be from any language I could find online. Later there was a page with a drawing, almost a painting, of a group of people dancing around a skeleton. The skeleton is standing up, dancing too. In another, someone being stabbed in the chest by an unsettling figure. This figure didn't seem to have a human head, but instead it was more similar to a goat. Beatrice was visibly scared. She gave a few steps back after seeing this last image. I wasn't really sure how to do after seeing her like that. I tried to think about something to say, but all I could say was, "Let's just stop messing with Mom's things." She took a few moments to react. She just nodded her head in confirmation, and we started to pack things back to where they were. I decided to make this message because I have no clue what's going to happen. To me, to Beatrice, to Dad, to Mom. I can't even fully understand what's going on. I think I'm scared too. There was a story about it in the paper. People at church offered their condolences. Kids at school that I never talked to would give me sideways glances. When a 5-year-old gets washed into a cave, and there is a 2-week search, it tends to get attention. I never wanted condolences. I wanted closure. Even if he was dead, I needed to see his body. The thought that he could have died down there, alone and in the dark, was unacceptable to me. When they stopped searching after 2 weeks, my only thought was that it would take someone longer than that to starve to death. There was plenty of water down there. If he had been washed into an inaccessible part of the cave, then he could still be alive. My dad had to physically keep me from trying to go back into the cave myself, to tell me that it was over, that he was gone. In my heart, I didn't believe he was dead. I was 16 at the time, a junior in high school. Kieran had been an oops baby, 11 years younger than me. He was the sweetest kid even though he was insane. At age 4, he'd broken a leg and an arm falling about 30 feet out of a tree he had managed to climb. He was always running around climbing and jumping off of things, yelling and laughing. He probably had ADHD in retrospect, but at the time he annoyed the shit out of me. I would try to do homework and he would basically whirlwind into my room like the Tasmanian devil from the cartoons, jumping on the bed and tackling me. He wanted a big brother, but the age gap made it hard for us to bond. Any of my spare time after marching band and homework was spent trying, unsuccessfully, to get a girlfriend, and I didn't treat him the way I should have. 2 years later, after a lot of therapy, I've stopped blaming myself as much. I know that it was natural to act the way I did, to feel the way I did. That even if he annoyed me, it didn't mean I didn't love him deeply. I know that I did. I know that I still do. When I went to UT for college, I met a couple people who were into spelunking. They didn't know about my brother, and I never told them. I couldn't bring myself to tell my parents, knowing what they would think. But I picked it up fast, with a conviction that I knew was illogical. I wanted to find his body or find him. It was denial, I knew that much. But I had nightmares about him, nightmares that he was in that cave, in the dark screaming my name, but I couldn't find him. After nearly 3 years, they never stopped. My therapist had a whole bunch of thoughts on the matter, as did my parents. But I knew what would give me peace in a way that nothing else could: finding his body. Partway through my freshman year, an opportunity presented itself. Kieran had fallen into a creek that went underground. Since then we had had record drought and the creek was nearly dry. More than 2 years before, the team had explored everything they could, but the path of the water was not navigable. It was a tunnel completely filled with a fast current, too dangerous to try and send anyone down even with scuba gear. I needed to see what it looked like now. I should have told someone I was doing it, even just my friends that taught me caving. Instead, I drove back to my parents' neighborhood, took a dirt road into the forest, parked my car, and went back to the cave. For anyone not from that part of the country, it's all limestone. Water eats through it easily, and there are caves everywhere. Most of them aren't as deep as this particular, but it's normal if you have a few acres of land to have a cave on it. This particular one was in a gully a couple 100 yards from the house I grew up in. Getting my gear out of the trunk, I walked through the familiar hickory and maples, feet crunching on the dry leaves, down the rocky hill to the creek. The mouth of the cave was small, only about 2 feet high and 3 feet wide. I could still picture the yellow tape, the police officers directing volunteer search parties day and night. Standing there in the quiet forest, I stared at that black opening as I had so many times. Even though the cave was significant, they'd already explored everything they could, mapped it thoroughly. The water didn't even go over the top of the rocks in the bottom of it as I crawled through without getting wet, besides a little mud. I had the cave maps they made memorized, but still carried a laminated copy. Following the weak trickle of water, I crawled a little ways, until the ceiling got high enough to walk if you kept your head down. All I had to do was follow the water about 100 feet, then see if the tunnel was clear. That was the only way his body could be. It smelled earthy with decaying leaves in the weak flow. Looking back over my shoulder, I turned a bend and saw the last bit of reflected sunlight fade out of existence, leaving only my headlamp. Watching my step on the slick muddy rock, a little salamander wriggled out of the way through the silty water. My heart was pounding in my chest as I made my way deeper into the earth, seeing how little water there was. Every inch of the cave had been checked, except for where I was headed. If the passage was clear, I would be the first person to ever go into that part of the cave. Well, the second. The black hole was shaped like an oval, a little over a foot tall and about 2 feet wide. 1 to 2 inches of water ran down the bottom of it. A knot formed in my throat, half feeling like I would cry and half feeling like I was scared. I knew that I should get someone else, but I couldn't stand thinking about what they would say. They would say there was no point, that the body would be washed too deep or buried, and that it could be too dangerous and to let a professional do it. Instead of getting help, I began to drill. The rock was all limestone, and it didn't take too long to get 2 secure bolts drilled to anchor my rope. I put on my harness and got onto my stomach. It's hard to tell just how steep slopes are in a cave, but the water gave me a good idea. I would be squeezing through this hole and essentially rappelling down. Looking in with my headlamp, it seemed like the top was a narrow point, and that it might open up. I'd never done anything this tight and steep with water in it, but something pushed me into that black opening, where I could hear water falling far below. Night after night of dreaming, Kieran was down there alone, screaming, terrified. It was a tight squeeze, tighter than I liked. To rappel, I had to have my face down toward the water and turn my head so that I could breathe. I inched down, struggling to use the equipment in the tight space. Progress was painfully slow, as I had to try and turn myself onto my left hip to reach the ATC, scraping into the rock on my stomach. Getting out wouldn't be any easier. The rock pressed in on me harder and harder as the angle got steeper and steeper. I was essentially in a tiny tube with a waterfall, going more and more vertical. My problem was that the tube was not equally wide in all places. It was carved by water, and would get narrower or wider on whims that I couldn't predict. I'd heard horror stories of Nutty Putty Cave, where the caver got stuck in a vertical shaft like this one, and it didn't help. I was coming up on the narrowest part yet, but it looked like it would open up below that. I'd taken my helmet off so that I could squeeze through better. In the tight space with the water splashing my face and running through my shirt and pants, I began to feel fear. Not fear like you feel standing near a ledge. That's a manageable type of fear you can step back from. Not a fear that you feel in the pitch black, unsure of what's around you. You can just find a light. This was a fear beyond that. A fear that each foot of vertical rock builds incrementally inside of you, as you know your escape becomes harder and harder. A fear that each pound of pressure as the rock smashes into your chest so that you can't breathe increases. A fear that right here, right now, if you panic, you will die. I promised myself that my parents wouldn't lose 2 sons to this cave. That if it got any tighter, any steeper, I would turn around. Just before my will broke, my chest scraped through a tight spot, and the tunnel began to open. I almost dropped my helmet down the shaft, but managed to put it back on. From the sound of the water falling, I could tell I was entering a large chamber. Shining my light around, there was a domed ceiling with a few small stalactites. A huge, murky pool of water was below me, and I couldn't see how deep it was. Large rocks were piled around the edges, and it seemed like the water was shallower on the other side. I rappelled down until my feet hit the water. They just kept going down and down until I was chest deep and stopped feeding rope. There was no way to know how deep the pool was, but I knew I would have to swim. The rope was my lifeline and I couldn't leave it. I did an awkward side stroke, pulling with one arm and trying to feed out rope with the other underwater. I'd never tried it before and I wouldn't recommend it. It sort of felt like I was going to drown, the weight of my clothes and shoes and the rope making it nearly impossible. Eventually, I made it 30 or so feet away from the waterfall and felt my boots start to sink into silty mud. Drenched and breathing hard, I found a rock to sit on. I felt as if I might throw up from the exertion now that the adrenaline was wearing off. A new sort of dread filled me as I looked around. This wasn't a small cave system and I could hear the water going even deeper. I couldn't be sure, but it looked like there were other tunnels, made by other water sources meeting up with this one. Should I follow the main current, as that was likely where Kieran's body would have gone? Or should I try to thoroughly map every tunnel I could find branching off of this chamber? The memory of his loss was fresh in my mind, but it had been almost 3 years. What would I be looking for? What would be left of his body? Scraps of clothing or bones? Regardless of what my dreams told me, what else could there be? I had decided to take a few minutes to rest, to gather my thoughts. Rushing things wouldn't help. The sound of water was a white noise, and I began to look around more calmly. I noticed a pale little fish swimming in the murky pool in front of me. All I can remember was a loud cracking sound. Thank God I was wearing my helmet, or I would have been dead. It's strange how when you get hit on the head, you can lose your sight and sense of balance but still hear things. I was shocked, but knew that I must have a concussion. There's no way for me to know if I was unconscious for a second or a minute, but I tried to scramble back to my feet in a panic. A rock had struck me from above. It must have come off of the steep side of the chamber from a hidden ledge. My leg was hurt, I could tell that much. There was a sharp, pulsing pain on my calf that I'd never felt. It was bad. I kicked my leg by reflex, only realizing consciously what my instincts had already figured out, only seeing the impossible as my dazed head turned around, and a scream escaped my mouth. He was eating me. The emaciated boy was pale as death, bloody teeth digging into my leg. Blind eyes were wide open, deep in their sockets, above sunken cheeks. Over and over he bit me with a hunger I could never understand. His arms were smaller than my wrists, his collarbones sticking from his chest. I grabbed his shoulder and threw him off of me in terror. He couldn't have weighed 30 pounds. For a second I saw him stand, my blood dripping from his mouth and over the ribs of his chest, before he ran into the darkness. Kieran. I screamed his name at the top of my lungs, went to chase him. Still confused from the head trauma, I was yanked backwards by the rope still attached to my harness. I frantically unlocked the carabiner and ran the way he had gone, ignoring the pain in my leg. Drops of black blood lead me to a low, narrow tunnel. In my headlamp, I saw his little feet disappearing around a corner. The crack he had squeezed through was impossibly small, I could never fit into it. Kieran, it's me. It's Chris. It's me. I began sobbing. Why couldn't I have grabbed him? If I just grabbed one of those tiny arms, I could have hugged him, told him I loved him, brought him back to the sun. Mom and Dad love you, they miss you. I miss you. I yelled over the sound of the waterfall. I kept saying anything I could think of. I said that I had food, tried to wrinkle the wrapper of a granola bar as loudly as I could. Told him that he could go home, screamed until I collapsed on the wet rock. In my mind, the last almost 3 years had been hard. What were they for him, alone in the dark, eating anything that swam or crawled he could get his hands on? He was only 5 at the time and would be almost 8 now. Would he be insane? Remember who I was, or even who he himself was? Looking down, a trickle of blood went into the main pool, dyeing it a dark color at the edge. I was bleeding a lot. If I didn't stop it, I wouldn't make the climb back up, and no one would know that either of us was down here. Wrapping the leg as tightly as I could, It kept bleeding. I didn't really have the tools to make a proper tourniquet, but tightened the knot as hard as I could until I screamed. Before I went, I left the granola bar unwrapped at the base of the crack Kieran had gone through, along with a spare headlamp turned on to the lowest setting. I screamed that I would be back, promised him, before eventually turning back to the pool. I pulled myself along the rope to the base of the waterfall. Painfully, I made my way back up it and somehow squeezed through the crack. I barely remember, to be honest, just the suffering of it and wanting to give up. I didn't give up though. Half for myself and half for Kieran. At the mouth of the cave I collapsed. Seeing the sun brought me to my senses just a little. I called my mom and she answered. I told her I was at the cave out back, that I was hurt, that I had found Kieran. I told her to call an ambulance. The leg is okay. I will be able to use it just fine, even though the scar will never heal. There was too much tissue missing. At the hospital, the doctors agreed that the injury on my leg was from being bitten, probably by a child based on the tooth marks. That fact alone was the only reason I could convince anyone that he was still down there, still alive. It seemed impossible, but he must have been eating the fish or anything else he could find. They sent down a search party, but no one can fit into a lot of the tunnels he might have gone down. My parents are a wreck, understandably. Even 3 days later, my dad is hysterical and my mom is just quiet. They wanted to go down to try and talk to him, but there's no way they would make the climb. I barely did. The rescue teams couldn't find him, and the tunnel is completely impassable to anyone other than a starved child. No one has seen him, but they put food in the crack I last saw him in, and when they came back the next day it was gone. I never gave up on him and I still haven't. Right now the plan is to leave as much food as we can, and hope that the rain forecast tomorrow isn't enough to fill the cave.